Thanks a lot, everyone, for joining this amazing webinar for the healthcare industry. It's great to have you here. I hope you all are having a fantastic day. Just to let you know, this is our first healthcare webinar for the year, and what a way to kickstart it with an exciting topic which we have for today, exploring innovations in healthcare technology. We are really excited to have you all here. Let me begin by introducing myself and AI CoreSpot to you. I am Nitin Naveen, Vice President of Innovation and Strategy at AI CoreSpot. With over 2 decades of experience in consulting firms dealing with emerging technologies, I feel fortunate to consistently engage with numerous stakeholders, global leaders, and their incredible problem solving and great innovative ideas. Joining me today are a few of my colleagues. Let me introduce them to you. We have Arvind, we have Archana, and we have Naveen, who is in the back end, who will add some energy to this event. A big applause to them for their dedication. Let me tell you something about our company, AI CoreSpot. We founded more than a couple of years, or around 3 years ago. It's a knowledge hub focusing on AI, ML, robotics, IoT, and much more. Our webinars aims to share the latest technological advancements in the industry. We dive into various tech sectors, unveiling a fresh theme every month, and steadily we are gaining momentum month on month. Our goal is to become the leading AI-driven community worldwide, where individuals like you with similar interests can contribute to mutual growth and success. We are committed to organizing industry-backed webinars and hybrid events, grounding our knowledge through credible data from different esteemed industry leaders, subject matter experts, thought leaders, and our trusted partners, InfoVision and Digit7. Additionally, we fine-tune our content across various digital platforms. We have access to the blogs, we do a lot of videos, we do a lot of podcasts, we share the newsletters to shed light on the ever-evolving industry. Now coming to about today's webinar for which you all are here for. As I said in the beginning, a really exciting topic is up for today, which is exploring innovations in healthcare technology. What you will learn here, I'll give you some glimpse, but yeah, mostly our speakers will be taking that initiative. We'll be discussing more on predictive analytics, we'll discussing more automation, the challenges which is there, the emerging trends which are there, what are the risks associated with things in the technology, in the healthcare, and a lot more, which will be going around in similar industry. Our expert panels will share invaluable insights and engage in thought-provoking discussions that you won't want to miss. Now let's kick off the discussion with some quick highlights. Meet our community partners for today. We have 4 great companies. Let me introduce them. Downstate is first, Rowling Board Corporation is the second. We have Hackensack Meridian Health, which is the third company. And fourth company, we have InfoVision, who is our knowledge and innovation partner. So thanks a lot for putting them together and played a crucial role in making this webinar a success. A big thanks to all our attendees also. Your time and presence means a lot to us. We appreciate you being here to achieve your goals and connect with fellow participants and speakers. Our platform's main goal is to help you gain valuable insights and build meaningful relationships. If you leave with a few innovative ideas or build new connections, we'll consider it a job well done. Now let me introduce our esteemed speakers for today. The first speaker is David, who is the CEO at University Hospital at Downstate. Our second esteemed speaker is Karthik, who is Vice President, Healthcare Engineering at Rowling Board Corporation. Our third esteemed speaker is Will, the Chief Pharmacy Officer, VP of Network Pharmacy at Hackensack Meridian Health. And our fourth esteemed speaker and moderator for the event is Erica, who is Vice President, Business Strategy and Innovation, Healthcare Life Sciences Manufacturing at InfoVision. Just one line of disclaimer before we start the amazing webinar. The views shared by all the speakers are their personal ones, and it's not related to any organization which they represent for. So let's begin the exciting panel discussion. Over to you, Erica, to begin this.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for the introduction, and good morning, everybody. As mentioned, my name is Erica Smith, and I'll be your moderator for today's discussion. So I'm really excited to kick off our discussion today around innovation and healthcare technology. Internal and external market dynamics have necessitated a transformation in both operating and business models within healthcare, as we've seen in the recent years. And this transformation has been further accelerated by the expansion of digital health tools and resources. So overall, we're hearing a lot of hype and buzz around different words being used, generative AI being one of the largest ones to date. But we're hearing this more and more frequently. So the question posed is often, how do you cut through this hype and identify trends and models that'll carry you into the future without taking on significant organizational risk? So a lot of these topics will be discussed as we continue to discuss the future of healthcare and innovation today. But before we dive into these topics further, we do have a fantastic panel of speakers, as mentioned, Karthik, Will, and David, who all have extensive experience in healthcare as well as tech innovation and within the industry. So they will be formally introducing themselves momentarily. And from there, we'll dive into the panel discussion by covering the core topics related to the future of healthcare. And anyone in the audience is welcome and encouraged to ask questions in the comments section, and we will address these towards the end of our panel, as mentioned. But that said, we'll have Karthik begin our introductions.
Hi, good morning, everybody. My name is Karthik. I work for Roland, who is a medical device manufacturer. We have products both in the healthcare and in the education platforms. My role primarily has been on the healthcare side. So I've been with Roland for about 30 years at this point, worked in a variety of roles. I'm currently the VP of next generation products. So I look at innovation, I look at intellectual property. I generally look at how do we look at what our customers are looking for as emerging platforms and deliver these to them via architectures and designs. Prior to this role, I've led different areas, the first being our firmware group, so a software group, our verification and validation, which is generally known as a test group, and then our healthcare delivery was my most recent job prior to moving on to this one. I also serve as a voting member on numerous technical standard panels. On the nurse call front, we have a couple. I'm on the US standard for cybersecurity. I'm also on NEMA's voting council for smart buildings, which looks at how do we apply new technologies, and more recently AI, in making our buildings smarter, healthcare facilities smart. That said, I'm excited about being a part of this panel today. I look forward to not only sharing, what I know. By no means do I claim, I have extraordinary expertise. This is a moving field. So by the time you master technology, it's the ground shifted. So we're all learning. So I'm excited to be a part of this panel and learn from the panelists, and most definitely look forward to questions and learning from you as well. Back to you, Erica.
Thank you, Karthik. Will, would you like to go next?
Sure. Karthik well said. Hi, my name is Will Carroll. I'm the Chief Pharmacy Executive for Hackensack Meridian Health. We're an 18-hospital system in New Jersey. And I serve as the strategic and operational overseer of the pharmacy division. And so the unique thing about pharmacy is we really cover the entire spectrum from your hospital visit, when you're outpatient, wherever. Pharmacy is kind of touching many different facets of the human experience. And so very excited today to join to discuss from a pharmacy perspective and from a health systems perspective some of the innovative trends that have happened, where we have some gaps and opportunities as well that I kind of get to face every single day. And so looking forward to, as Karthik said, learning from many of you through our discussions and through the other panelists for today. So thank you for the opportunity and looking forward to our discussion.
Absolutely, Will. Thank you. And David, would you like to round us out with introductions, please?
Sure. Good morning. I'm David Berger. I'm the CEO of University Hospital at Downstate. I am a surgeon by training, actually a surgical oncologist, and I've been the CEO at Downstate for 3.5 years. SUNY Downstate serves a very diverse, economically disadvantaged population. We are considered a safety net hospital. I firmly believe that technology is going to help transform how we deliver healthcare. And as a result, I'm very active in the startup space around digital health and AI. I'm a member of the Breakthrough One Alliance. I'm actually a board member, and I'm the board member of several startups, including Copient Health, Miche, Planary, Ultimate Robotics, Healthcare Control Systems, and Vios Murata.
Thank you, David. As I mentioned, I wasn't kidding when I said we have fantastic panelists today. So really excited to get all of your perspectives regarding healthcare and our topics. But overall, wanted to start in general, hearing from all three of you. Overall, in terms of the future of healthcare, we do know that economic pressures, digital acceleration, and rapidly evolving healthcare tech are fundamentally reshaping opportunities for value creation in healthcare. For example, we'd seen COVID be one of the biggest accelerators in a very long time within healthcare and healthcare IT. In your experience and in your respective roles, what has your perspective been regarding the direction and the future of healthcare as we continue on? Sorry.
I'll jump in. And I think it's important to understand what drives healthcare is the various payment models. So people are incentivized by how healthcare is paid for, and innovation revolves around how that actually occurs. So CMS has stated that by 2030, all of the patients on Medicare and Medicaid will be in some kind of value-based arrangement. So clearly CMS has set the target for where we're going, and that is clearly around value and value-based payment systems. What they're going to look like, that's another question, because if you look at over the last 10 years of different value-based payment models, none of them have really consistently shown an either increase in quality or a decrease in cost, which are the two things we're striving for in value-based payments. So we're trying to move towards a value-based payment system. I don't think we're there yet. And I think technology is going to help enable us to achieve both increasing in quality as well as decreasing cost.
This is Will. To add on, I think you're spot on. I think the other thing we're looking at as the value base, as our payer rates decrease and as our models shift, how do we become more efficient in the work that we're doing in the healthcare environment, right? To reduce the cost of the services we provide. So I think we're constantly looking at it from an AI perspective. Where can we leverage technology or machine learning to do some of the repetitive tasks like prior authorizations, billing, things of that nature, to repurpose the limited resources we have as far as human capital into doing more of that value-driven work. I think the other side, from a pharmacy perspective, we're looking a lot at the robotics and automation to determine how can we do some of our high repetitive motion type of work, or stuff that doesn't really require higher intellect, but maybe high risk. How do we leverage robotics to maybe make IV compounds and do some of that type of work as well? So I think it all kind of ties together in that space.
So just to come back to what Will said, I agree with you 100%. As a hospital CEO, we are bombarded with relatively early stage digital health and AI companies across the spectrum. I break it down into 4 different buckets. So it's automation on the back office things, automation on the front office, then it's automation on operational efficiency in terms of how we actually deliver care, and then finally, how we use automation, digital health, and potentially artificial intelligence to actually deliver care. Certainly the easier places, and the first places I look at in terms of advancing digital health, automation, as well as AI, is in the back office functions and in the front office functions. Those are much safer, and there are multiple proven use cases. The most challenging, obviously, is the delivery of healthcare using digital tools and as well as generative artificial intelligence.
I think I'll just dovetail to what's been said, but I may, give a little bit of a history to why I believe there's a fundamental shift. So Erica, you mentioned the pandemic. So it did shift. Now, clearly, when it comes to staffing shortages, there are some new problems in addition to the tele aspect of so many things which are happening now, which have been enabled or accelerated since the pandemic. But I see the shift from even prior to the pandemic, in that there is a historical shift, as I see, in the way healthcare is being looked at. Historically, treatment was like one size fits all. I think the pharma folks would agree. We're going towards personalized medicine as we look at, delivering care. Data flow, as a technical guy, was generally very fragmented. You could go to a doctor's office, they would charge you money to get your file. And today, thanks to the 21st Cures Act, there's a bit more bi-directional integration across these systems where you can expect some more data exchange. The focus in the past had been on the provider. I think the revenue models now, are sort of focusing more patient-centric scares. You hadn't heard of HCAP scores and other things in the past. So the shift has been towards the patient. The delivery of care is now shifting. Historically, hospitals and acute care facilities were the primary bearers of, at least the high level of care. That's seeing a shift now. It's shifting closer to the home. Reimbursement, I see another trend where historically you submit a diagnosis code and you got paid for what you submitted. Now it's a bit more outcome based. People are looking for outcomes and not just that you treated a disease. What's the outcome? And I think fundamentally the bigger shift is, which I see again where technology plays, is the historical view of medicine was to treat sickness. And I think I see a lot more off late where it's around preventing sickness as well. So there is an incentive for all of us, economic and otherwise, to not end up in these places of treatment. So I see that shift occurring and on the side of the healthcare itself. On the flip side, on the technology side, there's an increased availability of compute at the, let's say, at the edge, as the technical people say. That's by the patient side. You got your phone, which is today as powerful as computers of the yesterdays. You got wearable devices, and now they have these high performance GPUs. The kind of computing which you could do in the cloud is available on cameras and other devices today, where that technology can you can make decisions without the cloud. The next is the cloud itself. That was not out there. So today you get the so-called elastic compute. You're able to provision compute and you're able to get platform services for applications which were the domain of the large companies, the highly innovative ones could access. Now, companies who are not highly innovative can get to it too. So there's a shift from OpEx to CapEx for many companies who could not afford the innovation. And then last but not the least, this, you go from this high-speed connectivity, 2G, 3G, 4G, the numbers just keep going up. And, for folks, at least from my generation, who thought the modem was amazing when it connected us to, to a server, today we got high speeds just between anything at the home or at the hospital to something else. So to me, that confluence of that, the needs on the healthcare delivery side, which are coming from many sectors, the advancements in technology are clearly creating possibilities in technologies, which even maybe a decade back would have been somewhat visionary. I think they become very practical. We see tons of use cases we would cover. I think we could discuss more of these. But I think with that teaser, I'll leave you that there is these two, at least fundamental shifts on the technical side and the business side that I see are evolving and generating these opportunities, which will address multiple use cases.
Yes, Karthik, that was a great point. I think there's a couple of other societal and regulatory things that have also contributed. So the Accountable Care Act put aside a huge amount of money for institutions to put in electronic health records. So almost every single healthcare delivery system now has an electronic health record, and almost every patient in this country are on some kind of EHR. So the data is now there and readily accessible. The other thing is the introduction of the smartphone. The percentage of people who have smartphones, I believe, is over 85-90% at this point. And the ability to do transactions immediately on your smartphone has been revolutionary. And finally, the issue that we now have groups of the population who are digitally native. They've grown up being connected to the internet, being on smartphones, et cetera, et cetera. So this generation is much more likely to be willing to engage in the healthcare conversations on their smartphone. My children, none of them like to get on the phone and call anybody, but they'll text nonstop 24 hours a day practically. So I think those three societal changes have had a huge effect on our ability to move the digital needle in healthcare.
I agree completely. And Will, Karthik, David, all three of you have mentioned the shift towards value-based care and patient-oriented care. But you also mentioned quite a few areas around challenges and areas where the industry will need to start to overcome some technical implications to really make that drive forward. That said, I'm curious to hear from you, what challenges do you feel the industry will need to overcome to continue to drive healthcare forward towards that value-based, patient-focused care?
Yeah, I'd like to tackle, I think, following up what David just mentioned. He mentioned the Affordable Care Act and how EHRs are now in that setting, right? But I think the gap is in the ambulatory space, when they're in the physician's offices, when they're in these FQHCs and such, there's not a lot of communication between what's happening in the community, unless maybe it's a hospital-owned physician practice. But many times those patient medical records are not necessarily connected. So I think that's a gap that still exists. How do we tie so that when they're in the hospital, there's clear visibility into what's happened previously to getting here? And then once they return to the physician's office, they have visibility into what's happened as well, if we truly want to transform healthcare and impact, I think, wellness.
Absolutely. David, Karthik, is there anything you want to add to that?
So on the technical side, so I'm going to let the provider speak to what that would be. Clearly, there are implementation challenges on the when you get technology into any setting, you got to understand the purpose for which it was developed. You got to understand the skill sets of the folks who are going to implement it. Who's going to be responsible for monitoring it? What are the risk assessment considerations around the deployment of these technologies? It's convenient to have these in play, but if they become your life safety system and they weren't designed for those applications, you may end up with a mismatch between the intent of what the technology is supposed to do and the use for which it's being deployed to. So there are quite a few challenges. I can speak as we get further on the technical side. I've got a litany of challenges which we should speak to, but certainly on the administrative side, I think it's truly getting these, I would say the life cycle, both from, there is the design cycle, which takes you from concept to commissioning. And then there is commissioning to decommissioning. So these things get old. When they get old, they don't know that there could be a cybersecurity attack or there's technology aging on these. So a variety of issues, I think, on the implementation side, which we can look at, as we talk more about technology.
So I think a big challenge, especially for healthcare leaders in purchasing or implementing any digital solution, is there's so much noise. There are so many startup companies right now. It's how do you evaluate and how do you implement? We've created a framework for people who are thinking about purchasing a digital health solution and how to think about it. So the first part of the framework is to make sure that you're solving a specific problem. And I mentioned before, what part of healthcare are you looking to address? Back office, front office, operational efficiency, or direct clinical care? And does the solution you're looking at solve a big enough problem for you? The second part of our framework is, do you trust the people that are doing the selling? Who is the team? What is their experience? Does anyone on the team have specific clinical experience? And do you trust them to both implement and to grow with you in terms of the solution? The next thing is the vendor established in the market? How many places have adopted their solution? Do they have success? What are the references? And if the vendor is a new player, how will they de-risk their solution for you? And as has been mentioned by Karthik and Will, the issue of security is really, really important. Then the next thing is to understand what the business model is for this company. Is there shared risk in the business model? How will the vendor prove ROI quickly? And what stage are they in life cycle? Will the vendor itself actually survive? And then you have to understand what implementation looks like. Is the company itself experienced in change management Are they going to provide support for the implementation? And if the CEO of the company is directly involved, that may indicate more white glove service. And then specifically when you're implementing, what does success look like? And you have to know who owns and can use the data that's generated from any pilots. So you really have to look at this framework when you're evaluating and in digital health companies, if you're someone who's purchasing these solutions.
David, if I might add, I think that was spot on. I 1000% agree. I think the other thing that I think about is not only will they still be in the game for the long run, but because what you and Karthik have both mentioned is that we're constantly changing. Are they able to be agile and evolve to meet the need as the target continues to shift in the industry? I think it's another important thing to consider when partnering.
Great point. Well, thanks.
To add to both, I think another area, from an assessment is how interoperable is the vendor. Today, I think in healthcare, in an acute care facility, gone are the days of standalone systems which just communicate with, an application the vendor has developed. Ultimately, if data and insights are going to drive the business model, it's clear that there's got to be an economic incentive to share data and a technical capability to share that data. So to me, that interoperability piece is very critical. Of course, it's got to be safe and secure. That's the premise. But ultimately, if you're finding companies who are unwilling to share or unable to share, that may ultimately hinder the value you could get from integrating the device into your ecosystem.
The other thing, Karthik, about sharing data is also now with AI and generative AI models, can you wall off your own data? And that's really, really key, because you don't want to be driving other people's AI models and them using your data. You really want to have control over that.
I think it's an excellent point. It cuts both ways, because to get in a context of where AI model, you got to get different systems to cooperate. In our own business, you got the patient doing things. We make nurse call systems, so they're pushing buttons and requests for help. You've got the EMR or the AD system giving us some information about a patient. So if they won't give us the information, we can correlate if the model for calls is somehow related to a patient condition. We work with caregivers, so we need to know their location to be efficient about who to summon, who's near, what skill set to summon. So in some ways, to your point, when we look at these predictive technologies which rely on the data they've been trained with, if the data is incomplete, they're going to give you incomplete insights, and the more complete they are. But I do completely understand that there is a trade-off between walling off versus not supplying the data at all.
Absolutely. And when we think about emerging technologies, how should we begin to think about the ethical applications of them, such as AI, blockchain, identity access management? What are our thoughts there?
Maybe I take the AI first, as an area which I spend a bit more time on. So clearly AI, there's this idea, this notion of generalized AI, right? That's the utopian concept of AI, is I could build once and deploy across, different, at least within the same application across different providers in this case. So that is clearly nowhere. We're nowhere close to that sort of AI at this point. And part of what that is the bias in the data which you're able to gather to train these models. So ultimately, models, as much as we think, we're trying to mimic human behavior, and most humans are subject to bias. If the country you live in, the environment you grow in, the schools you go to, shape who you are and what you think and how you behave. Models are no different when it comes to any of those. So given the availability of data on certain demographics, it's appropriate that these models are optimal for certain kinds of use cases, and even within use cases, certain subpopulations. So there is clearly an issue of, is that ethical or not? What do you want to do, and what do vendors do in terms of, even if there's a certain profit motive towards a business model, towards going after it, what would be the ethical considerations? The second would be, I see again, this goes towards, I deal more with safety and performance, is how is the safety and performance considerations of these models communicated to those clinicians? The clinicians are very smart people. They may know math, and many of them may be trained in statistics. But for them to understand a model which is developed, and today it used to be machine learned models, which are basically classification or clustering models, simple, regression. You could explain the math off to somebody who's at least had some basic training. Today, these are, deep neural networks. Now they've got to generative, which is all these transformer-based models. It's next to impossible to explain why the model does what it does. So a clinician who's even trusted to implement or even use this as a decision support system may find this that there may be a complete lack of trust, and clearly, there is no ethical or there's no regulatory requirements today around the disclosures around what these models are able to do and not able to do. So I'll give the group a chance, but to me, these are two areas where at least I look at to see how best to improve how vendors can supply models, which if nothing can inform the users and the clinicians of what they have been given, so they can make better decisions as well.
What I might add is a slightly different perspective, but definitely agree with what you're saying, Karthik. And you made me think about we have a Centers of Discovery and Innovation. And so, from a pharma drug discovery type of perspective, I think of the ethical side and, ensuring that the diversity of study subjects when doing your modeling to ensure more applicability across the spectrum, I think is vitally important when you're seeking to really impact more lives, right? How do I ensure that this drug that you released that says going to do X, Y, and Z is going to do it in other demographics, not just the ones you studied in, right? How do we study it in more people? So I think extrapolating that concept in the innovative space of medication as we're going into curative diseases, as we're going into curative therapies, tailored therapies, how do we ensure that we are again making the ethical decision of engaging multiple diverse groups when developing these products?
So I would add a couple of things. The first thing that's extremely concerning to people is that there'll be an elimination of jobs, and people will be replaced by robots or artificial intelligence. For example, 5 years ago, it was stated that within 5 to 10 years, we would no longer need radiologists. Well, that certainly hasn't happened, and it's unlikely to happen because AI and machine learning are tools that radiologists potentially use. So I doubt that there's going to be a lot of clinicians directly put out of work by artificial intelligence. Others, yes, there are people who are in functions that are likely to change over time. But if you look at the history of industrialization, that's happened multiple times. For example, we no longer have people who make buggy whips. And that's because horses and carriages were replaced by automobiles. So jobs and job descriptions will change. It's unlikely that Amazon is going to have a lot of people working in their warehouses. That is mundane, repetitive work, physically taxing, potentially dangerous, and over time, that is going to clearly be replaced by robots. So while there will be changes and losses of some jobs, it has been shown over time any major advance in technology actually increases productivity and identifies new job opportunities. So I highly doubt that there's going to be a loss overall of jobs, but there is going to be new types of jobs, and we're going to have to retrain our workforce significantly. The other thing that concerns me as a physician is as we have these digital tools that are capable of finding things on x-rays or in patients' genetics that haven't been identified before, how do we know that they are really significant? What testing or over-testing will result as we identify these findings? And if we have these findings, which one of them will actually help people versus harm people? And what do I mean? It is possible now using artificial intelligence and machine learning on a CT of the chest to identify cardiac calcifications. And we know that people with some degree of cardiac calcifications are potentially at higher risk of myocardial infarction or other adverse heart issues. But if we're now picking it up on a routine CT scan of the chest, how accurate is it? At what point are we finding it? Are we now leading to over-testing and more people getting cardiac catheterizations that may not need them and are potentially injured by cardiac catheterizations? So anytime we have tests that can pick up something that were not picked up before, there's the potential for harm as well as benefit. And we need to keep that in mind as this moves forward.
And I think, David, that speaks to your point of that's why we still need people. You still need that clinical decision support, right? That's not just from the AI perspective, but how do we interpret those findings? How do we ensure that we're refining and best leveraging and utilizing the data that is presented? So really good point, really good point.
And there's actually a company, a startup called AVEY, that is an AI tool that actually helps people to self-diagnose their disease. And it's actually highly accurate. It's extremely well funded. And some people claim the market for self-diagnosis approaches over $50 billion. To me, it's a real concern because over the last years since we have the internet, a lot of people are self-diagnosing over the internet. I know my sister, who's an attorney, the first thing she does whenever she has a constellation of symptoms or any member of her family has a constellation of symptoms, goes to the internet and then calls me and says, I think my daughter has this. And I just laugh because you need to put clinical context to some of these issues. But it's going to be more and more difficult to not recognize that these things are coming, and how do we integrate them, and how do we then, once someone self-diagnosed themselves, how do you move on and actually confirm or refute that diagnosis?
I think, David, it's a funny story, but if you take any symptom, it could be as simple as a headache. Ultimately, it will take you to some form of cancer. If you go online, and most people will skip the first 20 things they read, go to the last line, and then everybody's calling their doctor, assuming, the worst case. So to your point, if it's not regulated in some way, or if there is no intelligence behind it other than it's any possible, it could create more harm and anxiety for those than what it does. But going back to the ethics, the other aspect of ethics is the misuse of either the information or the application. Now, we see it in the political front in different countries where facial recognition, all the computer vision applications, the promises in the radiology field, as David mentioned, where maybe in places where they don't have great radiologists or physicians, maybe you get good outcomes better than what the local physician would. In the US context, clearly we have good skill in the US. But most importantly, we all struggle with this. Let's take just the cell phone data. What we are the disclosures around how this information is being used, even though you will always find something about de-identification of data. It can never be traced to you. But ultimately, what's the purpose? Is my insurance company going to raise my rates, because they know something about me? Is my employer not going to employ me because they know something about me? So these are the kinds of questions. While these technologies are going to be predictive and giving us good insight into something in the future, wouldn't know with today's technology. Ultimately, there's got to be a very careful assessment of how this information is used, both as it comes to a patient and what they do, like we discussed with these applications. And then those folks who should not be receiving this information, or if for some reason they get it, they should get this in an aggregate way, where they're not making decisions around individuals, especially without their consent.
Absolutely. And David, in terms of that innovation, I don't know about you, but I feel like that would turn me into a hypochondriac. So I am thankful that I have not leveraged that technology up to this point. But I think that brings about some really great points regarding patient access and patient care. Technology advancements have been contributing positively to equitable healthcare access. We know that there's a long way to go when it comes to access to healthcare, dependent on population, demographics, etc. We're moving in a great direction, but it's obviously not there just yet. But curious to hear from you, David, specifically. You've seen this you've been in the surgical position from a practitioner standpoint all the way to being the CEO now. So in terms of equitable healthcare, how are you seeing technology advancements ensuring that there is that broader spectrum of population access to resources?
Yeah, so one of the challenges in healthcare delivery is delivering care to patients in rural environments. But now with technology, even people in remote and rural areas can access specialists anywhere in the world. So I think that is extremely helpful. The other issue has been in mental health. As a result, coming out of the pandemic, huge needs in behavioral health care. And there is a shortage worldwide of behavioral health specialists. But by being able to access technology, people can now get their behavioral health needs addressed through virtual care. And also there are a number of digital solutions specifically within the behavioral health realm. So I think digital health is starting to help democratize healthcare throughout the world. One concern, though, for me is, first of all, not everyone has broadband access, which will make it difficult to access some of these virtual solutions. Secondly, especially in older populations, not everyone has a smartphone. Certainly everyone below the age of 30 has a smartphone, but those above 75, 80 are some are technologically challenged and don't have smartphones. So that is a concern. And then institutions like mine that are safety net hospitals don't generate a margin. We have challenges in terms of identifying and implementing digital health solutions because they're expensive and we can't always afford those solutions. So my concern is in the short run, it may exacerbate disparities and access for some people, but hopefully in the long run, it will address those issues.
Take this. I think, clearly with David, I agree on both accounts. The equity is exactly, I think David mentioned democratization, that term's used pretty extensively now. So there are use cases in, cited examples of, let's say a diabetic retinopathy is used. It's very prevalent in India, and Google, did some work out there and attempted to, take their technology to villages and areas where care wasn't available. So you get these stories around how, and there are many of these where there are areas with low access or no access to quality healthcare. And then you're able to take a technology and give it in the hands of local physicians or local healthcare providers and augment their skill set or their technologies with these. So there is clearly a positive in here where a few experts will not be controlling or knowing it all. I think there is some value to it. Where it again becomes questionable, I think exactly as David said, is equity quite simply, income equity or race equity? Is it age equity? So equity is a broad term in terms of what we speak to. So when it comes to providing access in areas where it doesn't exist, I certainly see this technology over time certainly will prove itself and will be made available in areas where we don't have. Is it going to be equally accessible to all? Is it going to be equally useful to all? Is where I think some of the questions lie, and I think David's brought these up already.
Absolutely. And in terms of the technology advancements, I think that there something that's also important to discuss is also patient safety. So for that specifically, would really love to hear from you, Will. When it comes to drug interactions, they can often be quite costly and lead to poor patient outcomes. How can we be better leveraging technology to improve patient safety?
Yeah, so currently, we our most EMRs or electronic medical records have software that will detect or say alert and tell you there may be a risk for a drug interaction or a adverse reaction. The challenge is there's so many alerts it causes alert fatigue. And so there's a need for the development, a refinement of some of that technology, AI, somehow to allow us to filter through some of the noise, truly identify the actionable opportunities to David's point earlier to help us address those and mitigate some of the risks. Even if the technology would allow us to do absolute hard stops so that the medications are not administered to the patients, I think it could dramatically reduce the amount of incidents, of those kind of adverse reactions occurring. So I think there's an opportunity there. I think also from a safety perspective, as I mentioned earlier, we can leverage technology in the sterile compounding space. We make IVs, and so there's obviously a risk for infection if you don't do that in a sterile environment or properly. And so I think we can use our automation and robotics to leverage in that space in order to not only meet the demand with missing, I guess, employees or some of the challenges with labor, but also to do it safely and effectively. So, a couple ideas.
So I think patient safety is definitely something that can be addressed using AI and machine learning. So first of all, one of the most significant errors that occur within healthcare is actually diagnostic error. And diagnostic error is much more frequent than you would imagine. And there's also cognitive dissonance, which means once a diagnosis is reached, regardless of what other inputs there are that contradict that diagnosis, people will continue on that path. By incorporating decision support effectively, and I don't think we have that necessarily done at this point, we can help put potentially alternative diagnoses in front of providers and make sure that once they have additional inputs that contradict their initial diagnosis, that those are incorporated and then the alternative diagnoses are put in front of the clinician. So that's really important. The other thing is the alerts that potentially can be triggered that signify early on potential clinical deterioration. So we know that we often do not recognize that a patient has a problem until very late in the course of their disease. But it's been shown that there are potentially early markers that can suggest that a patient is suffering from clinical deterioration. And by using AI and machine learning, and as well as smart alerts to identify those potential early markers, we could also avoid significant clinical deterioration and treat patients much earlier on. And then finally, one of the big issues, and this is back to the value-based care on the outpatient side, there are a lot of process measures that need to be followed and enforced, such as maintaining blood pressure at a certain level, maintaining hemoglobin A1C below 7 in the population. And there's a lot of work that primary care providers have to do to maintain the health of a patient. And by using AI and machine learning and being able to put the information directly in front of the providers when they see the patient, and in terms of what they need to accomplish those goals is also a critical point in maintaining patient safety and patient health. So there are a lot of opportunities for improving patient safety using digital tools.
Just tagging on, alert fatigue is something I work on. We're a system which communicates alerts to caregivers, so we're very sensitive to the alert fatigue. There's, like with any technology, you have the statistical type 1. If you issue too few alerts, you may end up with a lawsuit because you did something you didn't do something you should have. If you do it too much, then the folks using the technology are going to give up on it because it just forces them to go to a room more than they should or they would like to. So the trade-off with these smart alerts, of course, is with the interoperability piece now, which we had alluded to earlier. You got your infusion pumps, you got your patient monitors, you've got your beds. Almost literally today, lot of equipment in the hospital has become smart. And smart doesn't mean they were dumb. Smart just means they're capable of sending their conditions over to another system, which can then triage and determine which of those conditions, relatively speaking, is more important to push forward. I think David mentioned maybe it's a predictive use case where you're not looking to alert because you think there's a problem. I've heard at least one company differentiate an alert from an alarm, saying alert's a condition where it's giving you a warning before things become an alarm. Alarm says there's a problem, run to the room. So there are different models of this triage of alerts coming in. But clearly it's something we look at. It's not a straightforward problem. Oftentimes the model can be flexible. The clinicians and the risk management of the hospital has to generally be involved in configuring these applications. So they're doing the right things for themselves. There may be a factory program default configuration, but generally speaking, it's a shared responsibility. The other area where I've seen the safety portion where we worked on is in falls. Falls, again, within an acute care facility are fairly prevalent. It could happen at home for sure, but certainly, they happen in the acute care facility. So once again, assuming this trade-off between summoning someone too frequently versus not summoning them at all, from a prevention perspective, there are a lot of these computer vision algorithms today which are running locally on cameras. You don't need the cloud because of the real-time nature. But these can detect with some certainty that a patient who's not supposed to get out of a bed unassisted is getting up, or maybe it's from a toilet seat, whatever it be, and provide some early warning to a caregiver who can intervene if necessary.
So another issue to talk about, it's not necessarily patient safety, it's person safety. And I'm talking about the older population. And people, and especially boomers, baby boomers, want to age at home. They don't want to age in a facility. And in order to keep them safe at home, there are now huge number of tools that can be used to monitor their walking, their weight, if they're eating and removing things from their refrigerator. So all kinds of systems, and we need to be able to monitor those things effectively. And using AI is one tool that to be able to coordinate all that information from the tools that we use to monitor patients at home. So that's another way of making sure that people age safely at home. And also the other issue is around hospital home, which also has expanded, and being able to monitor patients in real time safely is another issue that we can use digital tools as well as artificial intelligence.
David,
I think very much, Dave. I look at that same field as well, but these so-called invisibles, we all know about wearables, which in the phones, which are doing this. To your point, not every elder would want their colleagues to know they're being monitored. There could be a stigma against that. So there are these technologies called invisibles, which do exactly what you suggest is they observe typical patterns. So if you go to the bathroom 3 times at night and you haven't done so, or you haven't done moved at all, so they can look for anomalous conditions relative to what would be typical and send alerts as well. That's absolutely a good use case too. So.
I'd love to hear from you specifically. What are some emerging technical trends that you've noticed as the continuum of care has shifted from acute care to the home?
So from a technology perspective, this term, Internet of Medical Things is an all-encompassing umbrella, term to sort of encapsulate the endpoints, the devices. We spoke to the invisibles, the wearables, the phones, which can all generate data. Then the connectivity to the cloud. Ultimately, these have to be connected devices. The cell phone's already connected, but you got to connect the other things. All of us have a Garmin watch or something else, which isn't a smartphone, but still able to communicate a lot of data. So whether it's a use case for remote monitoring post-discharge, which means you don't want to keep someone in a hospital long enough, and you want to put them back because you don't want them to pick up an illness in the hospital. You don't want there's an insurance or there's a capacity issue. You're able to track some of these folks at home a lot better than you could. So the Internet of Medical Things has the endpoints, then you have the connectivity piece, and then you have the cloud. So there are two kinds of applications you want to, at minimum, develop. One is analytical, which quite looks at historical trends and decides to make some predictive, predictions, let's say. The other is real time. Your heart rate's going up, and there is no two ways around, not informing somebody and looking at some trends. So what I see primarily is an evolution of interoperability, and then these algorithms either at the edge, which can happen with the invisibles, or with these cameras at home, or in the cloud, which are allowing you both for long-term trends and for real-time alerts, use these systems. I think ultimately all these technologies, and we've touched on it already, are not immune to these cyber issues. So just like we spoke early on, there could be technical issues because the technology isn't mature, and then there could be issues with these platforms because they weren't designed with cybersecurity in mind. Oftentimes, you don't put an antivirus software on your watch. You're not putting endpoint protection software on your watch. So a lot of these problems we today associate with computers, I suspect as a usage of these devices, your Alexa at home, if you're going to be calling for help, if you're going to be doing some sort of health application on these voice control devices, they all now become, once you're connected, you're exposing every single device which historically was not connected to those sorts of issues which would be today attributable to servers and computers. So I think there is something we got to be cautious that the more connectivity occurs, which is all for the good, there are safeguards in these technologies to protect them from the misuse, from those who are continuously looking for these sorts of people to hack into.
Actually, you bring up a great point. I remember reading a statistic somewhere that more often than not, the cybersecurity issues in a lot of these breaches don't often come from the organization and organizational issues. It comes from the users themselves. So it's often the fact that you need to protect the user of whether it's one of the employees or a patient to make sure that they are implementing the right cybersecurity measures. As cyber breaches and cybersecurity becomes more pertinent as more technology is introduced, what have your thoughts been, and where do you feel like the industry needs to go to make sure that we are protecting our patients and patient data?
So first of all, regulation has to come in. Clearly, companies have a vested interest in making sure their products are safe and secure, but ultimately, everyone's looking for some sort of an external independent standard to test. So that the certification process has two pieces to it. You got to have a standard or a set of requirements which deem the application safe and secure and delivering the efficacy it needs to, and then an independent certifying body which needs to confirm that the product is indeed meeting those requirements. So that's number one. And there are lots of agencies working, and I can speak to that if we have time. The second piece, I believe, which needs to exist is some sort of a interoperability, again, a specification, but more importantly, an agency as well. So it makes it very expensive and impractical for companies to test with each other. You can do pairwise testing, but that doesn't scale, and it becomes very expensive to bring these together. So ultimately, we need an organization which is again involved in producing these interoperable requirements and the certifications against these. So these two I would see are blockers. There are many technical as well, which I could bring up, but these two would at least address the top issues.
You, Karthik. I would love to move towards some of our Q&A questions. In terms of automation, how has automation impacted the pharmacy practice, and where do you think that it's going?
Yeah, we continue to try to leverage it. I would say most people have probably seen in the news Walgreens and some of the bigger chains leveraging automations because they've lost so much of their workforce. And so I think Amazon in the same space, to David's point earlier, that there's been a big leveraging of automation there, and again, divesting of some of their human capital. So I'd say that there are some spaces that are leveraging it, but not necessarily repurposing from like a medication prescription filling process. But I'd say from the hospital health system side, we're looking at it and from, as I've mentioned before, some of the automation and robotics around sterile compounding, some of the automation and robotics around some of our medication refill processes. So the phone calls, decision trees, those things like that, prior authorization processes, those types of things are where we've been kind of leveraging there. But I think across the industry, you'll continue to see more movement into the automation and manufacturing of medications, automation in the dispensing and preparation of medications, and then even advancements in those gene therapies and tailor therapies from like a pharmacy pharmacotherapy development perspective. You'll see more investments, I think, in that space as well.
Thank you, Will.
Mhm.
And then we have one additional question from Sri Rama. This is for David. Can you give examples of back office and front office automation functions that have worked well? And he's also requesting your thoughts on automation on digital health and AI that have the potential to work well safely.
Yeah, so when I talk about back office, what I mean are things like pre-authorization, coding, billing, those kind of issues. And I think there are very strong use cases for all three of those. And I think there are companies already pretty far along in terms of those use cases. On the front end, I mean scheduling, triage, those kind of issues. And also there are a lot of use cases around that. In terms of implementing safely, I think there's a lot of tools that have already been implemented fairly safely. I think it's almost every electronic health record now has sepsis alerts. Sepsis is the most common cause of death within a hospital. And we were able to use sepsis alerts to reduce hospital mortality by over 50%. I think the place where it's really making an impact is assisting radiologists, because obviously radiologists are not perfect, they're human and they do make mistakes. And different AI tools that assist radiologists in identifying potential abnormalities have been really essential. So nowadays, there are really great AI tools to assist radiologists reading mammograms, especially identifying breast density. As I mentioned also on CT scans, it's been shown that using AI for CT scans of the lungs in smokers, that you can identify lesions much, much earlier than using AI and machine learning than radiologists. So I think there's a huge number of use cases that have already implemented AI, machine learning pretty successfully. You have to remember, and I think Karthik mentioned this earlier, that we've been using machine learning for a long time in terms of basic algorithms have been around for 10, 15, 20 years. So it's not that AI is particularly new, it's just that generative AI has really exploded over the last year or so with the advent of ChatGPT, Bard, etc. So there are already a huge number of use cases where AI and machine learning have been applied very safely in healthcare.
David, Will, Karthik, thank you so much for your input today. The rapid change in healthcare in the recent years really has spurred a lot of innovation and technology transfer at a rate that really has been unparalleled in the past. So I'm really hopeful that the industry will continue to come together and drive the future of technology further. Really looking forward to continuing conversations such as this, because this is such an important topic for us to be discussing in today's time. But overall, just really hoping that we can continue to further improve the patient experience and break grounds. But that said, I know we are at time, so Nitin, I'll move it back over to you.
Thank you. Thank you, Erica. And thank you all the speakers. I think we had a great discussion. Thanks a lot to Karthik. Thanks a lot to David. And thanks a lot to Will for their valuable insights. And thanks my colleagues, Arvind, Archana, and Naveen, for putting this together. So let me thank everyone, all our community partners, all our distinguished speakers who have been present and who have been in the past as well, and all the attendees who came together today to engage in this forum. I'm sure it created a space for the knowledge enrichment for the future. As our panel members were outstanding, their willingness to collaborate and share their valuable insights is amazing. Thanks a lot for coming together, guys. In case anyone missed any part of the session and want to revisit it, today's event will be available on our company's YouTube page for your convenience. As exciting technological advancements are on the horizon, we are thrilled to explore more in this year, 2024. Looking ahead, we have a diverse lineup this year, focusing on different sectors such as banking, financial, insurance, telecom, retail, supply chain, manufacturing, healthcare, energy, utility, and much more. So stay connected with us for the continuous learning. For more technological updates, visit our website and social media channels. We'll be sharing a wealth of knowledge, including details, announcement for upcoming events, and much more, aiding you in registration and attending the same. We look forward to your support. Please like and share our content on the social media. A heartfelt thanks to InfoVision, who is our knowledge and innovation partner, and Digit7, who's our technology partner. Explore their websites at infovision.com to delve deeper into technological advancements. We thoroughly enjoyed bringing this session to you and hope you found it as enjoyable as we did. We eagerly anticipate more sessions with you in the future. Take care, have a great day, and have a great year ahead, guys. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
The webinar has ended. Thank you for joining. Goodbye.